let's talk about cinematography. And when you think of cinematography or cinematic photography, what is it that you think about?
Lighting, composition, colors. I mean, those are like the main things.
All of those things are important and they do contribute to the final image. The thing about cinematography, there is no one answer. Everybody have their own concept as to what cinematography is. They're just certain contributors that help to make the image the final product that you envision, right? And one of those things is light and dark. So darkness plays a big role into that type of cinematic look, but the control of that darkness is really important because you don't want your images just to go pure black, right? Because it just start clipping and it probably won't look good. So one of the things you want to do when you're working with a lot of dark, low-key images is basically fill in those shadows so that you have a little bit of detail in there, but it's not completely like, a high-key type portrait. Is more of a low-key and it's more quote-unquote cinematic, right? The other thing that's a contributor to it, like you mentioned before, is the light or lack of light that helps with, just highlighting what is it that you want to highlight, right? One of the things I talk about is being a CEO photographer versus a COO photographer, right? And this is something I have in my head about that little concept. But you all know what a CEO does. A CEO is more, well, let me talk about what a COO does, which is like a chief operating officer, right? That person is involved and in control of the operation of the company, to making sure that the pipes and plumbing is working really well and making sure that from a mechanical perspective, everything is in place and they understand all the various components. With photography, how that applies is that with a CEO photographer, they are more obsessed with gear, the latest gear that comes out. They're obsessed with just getting that, understanding how to work every single aspect of the gear, right? And they're totally obsessed with that. They're like a technical type photographer, right? And then there's the CEO photographer. The CEO photographer is more of a visionary. When you're thinking about from a corporate perspective, they think about 5 years ahead. What is it that what will come? They need to look at the future as opposed to looking at the now, right? So when I'm thinking about photography, I'm putting on more like my CEO hat. I'm thinking about what is going to be my legacy. As I take this picture, is it a picture that I'm taking just for the gram? Is it a picture that I'm taking just to get likes? Or is it a picture that I'm thinking about building and leaving something behind? When I'm no longer here, is it something that, my kids could be proud of? Is something that, whoever's looking at these images after I'm gone, will they be able to sit down there and be like, like how artists, when you go to an art show, you look at a painting and you be like, you put your own little story on top of that little painting that you're looking at. And that's what I hope, I should say, when people are looking at my images, fast forward, when I'm no longer here, is that they could put their own story and build it to it. So when I'm entering into any photo shoot, especially in type of cinematic type of photo shoots, first thing to me is what the story is that I'm trying to tell. Usually I don't even have no clue what that is, but when I have an initial image in my mind, and Sharon, who we're going to be working with, she could tell you this because I work with her all the time. I usually say to her, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm about to do, but I lie because in my head I do have some kind of a concept. I just don't know how to express it, right? So the important thing, at least in my view, when it comes to cinematic photography, is a vision. And then you apply those components that we talked about, which is light, shadow, color. You bring all of those components into it to help tell your story so that you're more of a CEO photographer as opposed to a COO photographer. You use the COO part of your brain to help you with the execution of your vision, but the overall vision is like 80% of the entire photo shoot, and the other 20% is the operational part, the execution of it, like the gear that helps you to make that final image your own, right? So today, when we were basically going through this, is my goal is not necessarily for you to walk away with this as like, oh, this is how you're gonna do X, Y, and Z to get this end result. It's more like, why am I doing all of these things to get this end result? Because that's the only way, when you're questioning things, that you're gonna walk away with something that's a little bit more meaningful than more technical. At the end of the day, you technically executed the image properly, you got a great, image technically, but does it mean anything? More important, does it mean anything to you or somebody else that's looking at it? Does all that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So that's my overall goal today. A couple of things in addition to that is lighting patterns. I have a video on this that goes more in depth. If you haven't. Most of the time I'm putting on my CEO hat as a photographer to try to come up with that vision, try to come up with that overall goal. Because without the vision, you're just basically taking pictures and you're not creating them.